Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I'm Courtney Anderson, and this is our 215th episode. Yay! Episode 215 of this program. This is our audio talk show podcast, and we have a companion video show. I always mention please drop by CourtneyAnderson.com. That is our central main website. It is a wealth of content and literally hundreds and hundreds of pages of content. Each of these individual shows, 215 of them, have individual micro show sites as part of our site. We also have our companion video show. We have our blog. We have articles. We have upcoming webinars and seminars and courses and all kinds of exciting, awesome things. Please look at the site as a library. This is not a site that you should think you're going to come look around for a minute or two and leave, because sometimes people say, "Well, I'm overwhelmed." Well, that's the idea. You walk into a library or a museum, and you see I aspire to great things, but in my own way, that's what's intended. You should walk into a library or museum or collection and say, "Wow, look at all this." Well, yeah, that's why it takes time. And that's why you go and you come back and you bookmark our site, and that's how it's meant to be explored over time. And that's why hopefully we will collaborate and be in a partnership together, working together to surpass your goals. Today, here in episode 215, we have a show that is part of our Self-Employment Ecstasy series. Self-Employment Ecstasy series is for people who are self-employed. And we have data that we've shared in our notes about this series, about sort of the birth of the series and why we do it, that supports the outcome that self-employed individuals tend to have higher positive results in terms of their feelings of autonomy, their feelings, positive feelings related to their work. And so why not? Why not just be very honest and candid and say, you know what, at times when you're self-employed, it does feel a little bit like ecstasy. That's how good it feels. And of course, it's me adding a little bit of an artistic flourish to the data that does show that as a group, self-employed individuals do have higher reported feelings of self-satisfaction and things of that nature. And again, it may correlate just to the fact that they have a little more autonomy than many people in traditional employment situations where they have less decision-making authority. So in our Self-Employment Ecstasy series, our show today relates to one of those things that unless you're in our self-employed community, you never really think about it. If you are in the self-employed ecstasy community, then you think about it, because I've talked to you. I work with self-employed individuals, whether they're working independently or they have built up a large infrastructure in their firm, and this issue comes up rather frequently. So our show topic specifically today is, my employees think I am rich. Help! My employees think I am rich. Help! And as I said, this is one of those types of issues that you tend to be exposed to more in our self-employment community than you do in our other employment communities. So you're employed by other people. And part of it is because if someone thinks you're, quote, the owner or an owner, then often, if they themselves haven't been in that situation, they'll think, well, the money just goes to you. So let's walk through some of this. Now, the challenge is that people who run businesses, and again, whether it's one person and you maybe don't technically have employees, and maybe you have vendors that you hire or contractors to help you with some of the parts of your practice, or maybe you built an organization and you've got hundreds of thousands of employees. if there's some perception that you have some ownership interest, it's very different from being a manager or an executive. Now, of course, many managers and executives themselves have ownership interests, especially if it's an organization that's set up with the ability to have partners or to have shareholders. So I understand that, obviously. But for many people who themselves have not been in a position where they've either been an executive or a senior manager or a business owner or self-employed, especially if they know that it's, quote, your business. In their mind, they see some sort of transactions, right? And they do, and in their mind, I'm this is my sort of very crude and rudimentary interpretation. There's money coming in. They're not getting all of it. They know that, right? Because you're paying them, either a wage or you're paying them per task or whatever. And often there may be the idea that, hey, whatever that money is that came in, then they didn't get all of it, and a lot of it is going to you. So this especially is something for people, again, that there's a clear understanding that there's an ownership interest. So let's say that you're someone and you've opened up you're a veterinarian and you've opened up a veterinary practice, and it's, let's say it's your name on the veterinary practice, right? You're the veterinarian, so I'm veterinarian Vic, and I've named my business Vic's Veterinarian, and I am Vic, the veterinarian, and somebody works there, right? Often they do get that, right? Like, you're Vic, it's the sign says, Vic's Veterinarian, and they understand that you own it or own some part of it. And the idea often comes from people that there must be, wealth. You must be rich. You own a business. Your name's on a sign. If your name's on the business, that it makes it even more of a perception, right? It says your name right there. Carol's CPA, you're Carol. Amy's Animal Daycare, you're Amy, right? So it must be you. And when this topic comes up and I'm doing individual coaching or strategizing sessions with my clients, or I'm doing group corporate education or corporate training issues, or even sometimes when I do keynote speeches, it usually is tinged with frustration. Because someone will say, look, I was trying to talk to my team members, whether they're an employee or contractor, vendor, whatever, and they came up with a fantastically unrealistic number for a raise that they wanted, or for some sort of contract term for helping on my redo my website. And I think it's because they think I'm rich. And the frustration is, as in the show topic, right? Help! They think I'm rich. I know they think I'm rich because they asked me for a number that in my mind is just it's not even possible. They asked me for a raise and I'm thinking, are you serious? Do you see how many people have come in our CPA or our veterinarian business? Have you paid attention to how many people have come on our website and purchased recently? And it seems that the frustration comes from the person who's a self-employed community member not stopping to step back and understand how things seem when you're not the one making sort of the macro view decisions. In other words, even if it's an organization, and let's say that there's been a slowdown in revenue, this is where especially self-employed ecstasy members get really frustrated, and they say, look, they see that there are less people. They see that there's less, website sales. They see this. How can they then ask me for more stuff? And my argument is they don't see it. And even if they did see it, often someone who's not been in a position where it's been their name on the business, or that they've been the one who owns the pizza store or the yoga studio or whatever it is, In their mind, you are rich and you must have other money somewhere else. So they don't understand that the money is coming from a specific correlation between how many people purchased stuff on the website, or how many people came to yoga class, or how many people brought their animal for animal, daycare, or how many people came to the vet. They don't necessarily think that those things are totally related. And let's be very fair and share a little bit about why that may happen. It may happen that someone thinks to themselves, hey, look, I work, and let's say I work in the United States, the federal minimum wage is in the $7 range. Okay, so $7 an hour. Okay, so if I worked, let's say I made $8. Let's say I made $8 an hour, right? So I work 10 hours and I will earn a gross of $80. And then depending on where the person works and what kind of situation they have, they may get that total gross, and then themselves have to cover their taxes and payment into any Social Security system or any other type of governmental program. Or they may have a situation where the employer takes those mandatory amounts out of their wages or withholds them, and then they get the net, right? So in either event, those are the details, but the thing is they earn the $80. So in their mind, I get $8, I work 10 hours, and I get $80. So even though they do understand the math of that, like all of us, you understand what you know. So if that's your world and you get that, then I've worked a variety of opportunities in my life. Not as many as some people, and less than and more than others. But what I did when I was in my late teens, in my early 20s, I worked a variety of minimum wage jobs in food service. I was a waitress, which in the U.S. in some parts, well, there's some jobs that you get paid less than minimum wage because the idea is that you're going to make tips and make more. Waitressing is one of those. So you weren't even near the whatever the minimum wage is, you make a lot less than that because the idea is you'll make more in your tips. I worked as a pizza delivery driver. I worked as an administrative assistant. I worked as a telemarketer. I worked as an entry-level security guard. So I worked on an assembly line, on a couple of assembly lines actually, in manufacturing, just entry-level again. So I worked a variety of minimum wage jobs, and my colleagues, I remember, from very well understood the math of it, right? Because I work this many hours, I make this much, and then they have, we give your bills. I got to pay my part of the rent, or maybe I'm living with somebody else, a relative. I got to buy groceries, whatever. Like everybody knows their world. So if you're in that situation, especially for somebody who works an hourly wage, in your mind, you don't really think about where does the $80 come from. All you know is that your deal is that you're going to do this amount of work, and then they're going to pay you this amount of money. Now, how they get that money is not really your concern. And to be very fair, it shouldn't be. That's why I'm not in charge. When an organization is a big, well-known brand, so let's say it's a global brand. Let's say it's McDonald's, or it's, General Motors or something, big global brands. For many people who themselves have never run an organization or a business, the details of how the business is structured, right, and the details on an earnings report are not that particularly interesting to many people. All they know is it's a lot of money, it's a big rich company, and they have money, and that's and all I need to do is negotiate my part and do my job. How they come up with my $80 doesn't bother me. There does seem to be more understanding in a big organization that if it's like I said, if it's a big global brand, right? People do tend to think it's not this person who's my manager right here who's giving me my paycheck who owns all of McDonald's. Like they do understand that, right? as we said with our self-employed ecstasy team members, part of the challenge is many times these are smaller firms. Sometimes they're not, but many times they are. But often there's some understanding that you as a human, you're the one, like you own this, or you own part of it, or your name's on it. And that is a whole nother level of, well, hey, if your name was McDonald, and I know that it wasn't, the McDonald's that are the ones that made McDonald's as we know it, because they were purchased by uh, the in the oh gosh, the people who purchased and built the brand of McDonald's were not the original McDonald's, right? They came along after and bought into that concept and then and became very successful. It's a great business case study if you're not familiar with it. That's not what I'm arguing. What I'm saying is, to the average layperson, they don't really know about that and they don't care about the details. All they know is they see a name and they see a person. And they do tend to understand with bigger global brands that the person who works there, who's their manager, doesn't necessarily own like all of General Motors. They do get that. But they don't necessarily see when it's a smaller organization or it's an organization and your name's on it. Right? So in their mind, you're even wealthier, because they do see, like I said, that at a big global brand, that person who's their manager isn't the owner, and they also then sort of see them as just another employee. They understand they make more money than they do potentially, right? That's why they're the manager, but they don't necessarily think, well, they're like, a trillionaire somewhere because they're working here with me. They just we both work here. When you have some ownership, it does change the calculus in a lot of people's mind. And because of this, and I've definitely done programs about this, and we'll do more programs in this show. Some people try to not share that, right? Some people intentionally don't put their name on the business. Some people intentionally, even though they do have an ownership interest, or they may actually be the owner, they don't say that. They don't, they're just sort of say like, oh, I'm calling for, the spa store, and I wanted to see what you would charge for doing a redo of a website. They don't necessarily say they're the owner, often because they don't want people to know that they're the owner. Now that's a whole other question about ethics and is that effective and all of that, but you can see why, and it's because of what the show is talking about. When people think that you own it, you don't just work there, then their mind often thinks, well, that's what owners do. They're rich. Now let's be very candid. Rich and poor and all this, these terms are so inaccurate, and the challenges are so subjective. If I make $8 an hour, which is very close to the minimum wage for many jobs, then it's subjective. If I make $8 an hour, if there was somebody who made $20 an hour, I think they're rich, and rightfully so, right? They make more than twice what I make an hour, and there you go. Now they may only make about $800 a week. They may make less than $30,000 a year, but that's still way more than what I make. So it's relative. So when I talk to people and there's the frustration, and there's so many examples of this, right? Someone, oh, I couldn't believe this. They asked for this. I don't understand why. They think I'm rich. Yes, they do think you're rich. And I'm also going to add to this is all defined from the person's individual perspective. So potentially, most likely, you are rich. Now, many people in self-employed ecstasy say, not really, because I have some firms, especially firms that are not focused on growing to being a global multinational. It's possible, and it does happen, that the person who owns it is actually worth less on paper than the people who work there, because they are going into the red to get the $80 to pay the person, right? So there was some money that came into the business, but you got overhead. And so what some business owners will do, and this is a whole other topic about when and why and how you should do this and how long you do this, is they'll borrow money. They'll literally go into the red to go ahead and be able to pay their team members, because they know if they can't pay their team members, the team member can't do the work. I mean, it's basics. It's illegal, right? I can't have people work and not pay them. So some people in self-employed will get mad and say, look, they actually are worth more than I am, because I'm carrying debt to pay them the $80, right? But the reality though is you had the ability to get that debt, and what that means is Look, there's a difference in orientation for people who look at the world and think, okay, I can go out from nothing and build something, a lawnmower business or a house cleaning business or a dog walking business or whatever. It's a different mindset than someone whose mindset is, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to go be the best team member I can for what somebody else has built. It's a totally different mindset. They just view options and opportunities differently. And both of these are equally awesome opportunity paths to surpassing our goals. But different personality types, right, are going to like different things. The person who's self-employed, focused, and has that personality can become frustrated just because it's a different way of looking at the world. Your employees do think you're rich. Your vendors do think you're rich. And to them, you are. They, in their mind, they would say, hey, I couldn't even get somebody to loan me money to pay somebody else $80. And in many instances, they'd be telling the truth. Now, many self-employed people who are maybe frustrated or not in their best frame of mind would say, yeah, well, the only reason I could borrow the money is because I borrowed money against my future income. I borrowed money against my accounts receivable. I borrowed money against the commercial building. Well, yeah, but you had the ability to do that. And my very candid point in this program and this series and everything we do is to be very honest about that. If other people could do that, then or they believe they could, then they probably would. They don't even know how to start with that. Most people have no clue. How do you even get a business card with your name on it or a domain with your name on it? How do you even set up a business where you have a yoga studio? They don't even know how to do that. How do you negotiate a lease? How do you do any of this? How do you open a commercial bank account? They don't know these things. Now, many people who are interested in this will learn it. But what we do in these programs is to teach people these things. But they don't know any of it. It just sort of seems, and I hate this. I don't hate it. I don't know if it's the most accurate. But it does seem to someone who hasn't done it almost magical. Right? Like, wow. And especially when they come along later when it's all done. Oh, I went over there and there was your ice cream store. There was ice cream in it and the lights were on, their customers and everything. Okay. Now, the person who's the self-employed person will say, yeah, but look at all the work it went into that. Right? 8 million decisions. I'm obviously exaggerating, but it feels, when you're self-employed, it feels like that because you have so many decisions. Right? What kind of equipment, how much, what it's going to cost, where's it going to go, how many, you got to pick everything. Or you got to have somebody else that you got go hire to go help pick it. You got to make so many decisions, right? Which is part of why when you look at the outcomes with these sort of positive feelings of well-being is because you feel like you're in control. Whether you are or not, you feel like it because you do have, right, your finger on the scale and you're able to influence outcomes. Yeah, we're going to have this many flavors of ice cream. The store is going to be, this size. We're going to put this sign. We're going to be open these hours. So you do feel in many ways that you're more empowered because you're making decisions. Even when your business fails, which of course the majority of businesses, unfortunately, and fortunately, because it's how you learn, do, you recognize that it's a whole nother delicate skill. You got to learn when you don't know at all enough, and when to get somebody who knows more, and you also have to be able to relinquish control, which is a huge challenge for people who are self-employed because you're so used to doing it your way. That's to say that the mindset that the self-employed person has is in many ways almost the opposite of what the employed person has. The employed person rightfully is like, look, none of this is my concern. How you picked how many ice cream colors and what hours we're going to have. None of that's my concern. I just work here at the ice cream store. So my only concern is that you're supposed to pay me $8 an hour and here's my schedule and give me my money. And they're right because that's their job. It's a very different type of job. And this friction with this show topic, my employees think I'm rich. Hell, yeah, they do think you're rich. There's literally nothing you can say or do. And when I've worked with people one-on-one, when I do my individual strategy and coaching and collaboration sessions, sometimes people get really angry and they're like, and they say, well, how can they think I'm rich when they see the numbers? And my point to you is, even though they see the numbers, like let's say it's the person that's your bookkeeper, right? And they do see it. Maybe it's your manager and they do see it, your office manager, and they actually do see it. They don't necessarily relate the money that they see coming through that business to their paycheck or to you. Because for most people who have an employee history, the only money that comes in is the employee money. You don't have like another thing that you have some ownership interest over in, and maybe it brought in $50,000 and then you had to pay out, $31,000 in overhead. Most people don't experience that type of life. So even though you would sit there and think, well, it's basic math, how can they think I'm rich? They think you're rich because you're even in the position to be able to make these decisions. Because you have the wonder and the opportunity to even be the one somewhere looking at these numbers. Most people don't have that. And so, yes, it's a very different orientation. They do think you're rich. And my argument is that relative to most people, and again, even if you're negative in the whole, hopefully with the plan and things that we talk about in our programs, or you reach out to me individually, we can strategize so that we can turn your business around so you can make it viable and a going concern. But you are often in a better situation than they are. So this needs, on both sides, there's a lot of stereotype and misunderstanding that can negatively influence this. So let's see about the solution. The solutions are really simple. You're in self-employment ecstasy, as per the name of our series. And that's, I believe, something to be appreciative of and grateful for. The team members that are not, then are not. You see things your way based often on your requirements of your work, and they see things a different way based on the requirements of their work. And both of those are right. Now, nobody's wrong. You are going to have to accept that, yes, they do believe you're rich. They also, because it does seem magical, don't necessarily understand how you were able, even if you're totally in debt, up to your eyeballs, beyond that, right? They don't even understand how you got anybody to give you that type of opportunity. So to them, relatively speaking, it is different. You have a wealth of resources. They do not understand even if you're having to go into debt to pay them. They don't understand that. They do think you have other resources. And that, I guess, and this is me now thinking back when I worked minimum wage jobs, their perception is, look, your name, or you have the power, you have some sort of ownership interest, that you do have some way somewhere to pay them. And of course, we don't even need to mention this, but come on, you have to. That's why people do sometimes go into debt to make payroll, because you have to. Legally, this is like no question. So the reality is that the vicissitudes and the ups and downs of self-employment and all of this is so beyond the scope of most people. If you're that aren't in that community, if you're an employee, you get your $80, right? I get $8 an hour. I work 10 hours. It doesn't matter whether there were more customers than you've ever seen or there were zero. It doesn't matter. You still get that's your deal, and that's the difference. The self-employment ecstasy community member understands that the river of commerce flows. And sometimes you have days where you think, wow, that was one of the greatest days ever. That's more money than I ever thought we could do. And then you have a lot of days where you think, now we made zero. And then you have other days where you're like, we're at negative, right? I wish I could see zero. But you get that because you see that. They don't. Their frame of reference is really clear. I get this much and you pay me. And that's it. And whether and how many customers and all that doesn't really matter because it's not tied to them. Even when you bonus people, and I know I've done this over the years with team members, I bonus them or commission them on certain types of sales. One is an incentive, and two, because I want to share. This is great, right? We landed this big deal. You did a great job. Let's share that. But it still isn't necessarily something where the person who's not in the self-employment ecstasy team members position gets it. So stop arguing over this. Yes, they do think you're rich. There's nothing you can say, there's nothing you can do to change that. Even if you are, in your mind, debt laden and stressed out, and in that situation, please contact me so we can start coming up with a plan to get your business to viability and make it the full ecstatic experience it should be, but they don't see it, and they look up to you in a lot of ways. And the responsibility and the joy of being in self-employment ecstasy is you need to accept this. You can't argue it. So take this discussion off the table. They do think you're rich. The more you go to them with, oh, we're looking at these numbers, you're having trouble, they don't see it. If you really seriously are in trouble and you're going to have to make cutbacks, we're going to different hours, we're going to have to look at the pay structure, then you tell them that. Remember, they believe in you enough that you're going to take care of it. They're going to get their check. It's going to work out. And there's a lot that we can discuss and do so in other programs about how much it's sort of, this isn't the greatest analogy, and it's in common law, which the United States inherited to some degree from England. There's the idea of the law of respondeat superior, right? It's Latin, respondeat superior, let the master answer. And the whole idea, and I'm not going to get into obviously the details in this, but the whole idea is that the employer, the master, is responsible for what the employee, it's called the master-servant rule. The employer is responsible for what the employee does while they're in scope of employment. And it's the basis for most of the things that we deal with in nations that follow this type of common law system. So if your employee is doing their job, they're in scope of employment, they slip and they fall because of something at the store or something related to the business, you're responsible. Whether it's through workers' comp or whatever, you're responsible because you're responsible for them, and you are responsible for them. Now, even if they're not an employee, then you don't have respondeat superior, but I would say even if they're a contractor or a vendor, you're still responsible. So you treat them with respect. And it's your responsibility to make the decisions and strategize and to get the knowledge to get the business to where it is able to be viable and ongoing. And you don't put that on other people. You also have to accept the fact that they do view you as having more resources than they do. You honestly, you probably did because you got this far and they haven't. Not that they even want to. They probably don't even, I'm not saying that they want to do what you do. If they did, they probably would be asking you and talking to you about that. They probably don't. Most people don't, because it's a very small minority of people that want to do self-employment for a variety of very valid reasons. But if you chose this, then of course you're in ecstasy, sometimes, but you have to take the responsibility with it. It's your responsibility to structure it and set it up and continue to run it so that it does succeed, whatever that means. If it means that it just it's able to pay for them and you make a little bit of profit, great. But the expectation for the self-employment ecstasy community member to go and say, well, they should understand and share the burden and understand, we're going through. They don't. They do understand when you're saying we're going to cut back hours. They do understand, if you say, hey, I'd love for you to stay, but I'm not going to be able to pay, what you've been being paid. Would you be able to work, for $7.75 an hour instead of $8? Those they do understand, but all the behind the scenes stuff of how and why is not really their issue. And you know what? For you to get frustrated and they think I'm rich. Yeah, duh. So my argument to you is put this aside permanently. Yes, they do think you have more resources. Using the word rich, fine. It's not accurate, but it's close enough. So accept that. There's nothing to help. And like I said, the frustration usually comes from the self-employment ecstasy team member where the business isn't doing what the person would like it to do. And then they get frustrated and say, hey, the employees or my contractors seem like they don't even care. That's not it at all. They totally care. It's just that what do you want them to do? They're not an owner. Unless you're going to them and saying, hey, look, you can buy into the business or I'll bring you in as a partner. That's a totally different discussion. But most of the time you're not. You're just going to them and out of your own frustration, sort of like, well, don't you see this? Not really. They don't. That's your job. And they, as your team members, may have some ideas. They may have some good suggestions, but that's not their responsibility. You need to work on infrastructure and looking to see what is happening at the sort of macro level that's causing these persistent challenges. But yeah, they do think you're rich. They will continue to think you're rich. If your business is going well, great. They think you're even richer. If your business is going well, and it is a fantastic revenue stream for you, awesome. They do think you're rich. And again, they sometimes you make a request or people may say things and you feel like, well, golly, don't they see this business? It only brings me in, 50,000 extra a year. Or it only gives me, 500,000. I'm not, Bill Gates. I'm not Carlos Slim. Yeah, look, again, this is all relative. And for somebody, how rich you are is not really their concern. Their point is that you're, quote, richer than they are, that you have more resources. And that often is accurate. And you arguing about it is a waste of time. There's a lot of things that we will continue to bring up in this series. You need to think about and how you react to other people, how you use your leadership skills, and then the way that you can do a lot to make your employees and contractors view this as a shared vision, and we're all going to pitch in and work really hard together. And you can also do a lot to create animosity where they feel like, hey, you're just some rich person who shows up intermittently and doesn't really care about them. And that is all an outgrowth of your leadership and a lot of the things that we talk about in other series, your communication skills, all this. So there's a lot going on that you can control and influence to result in a situation where, yeah, your employees, they do think you're rich, but they also respect you. They trust you. They're glad to be here. You have low turnover and high engagement. You can do a lot. You can also do a lot to negatively influence things the other way, but the core issue in this episode was for you to accept this reality or this perception, which we're going to use as reality. Yes, they do think that you have more resources. We're going to use the term rich, and you do. So there's nothing I can do to help you about that. So let that go. Now, let's talk about how to either get the business where you would like it to be or where you need it to be. Or if you're already successful, how we can maximize that. And then what we can do with your executive leadership skills to ensure that you do have either management and team members that are engaged, that do stay for the long term, that are viewing themselves as part of something that's larger than themselves. And those are all things that we can work on together. But you're never going to be able to change this sort of basic premise of they think I'm rich. Because yes, you relatively speaking, have more resources that you're able to deploy to get to the point you are. That's just a fact. And it's a good thing. You should be proud of it. So table this and accept it and then just keep moving forward. And like I said, then let's talk about how we can get this business to a point where it's more joyful than ever and profitable. And what we need to also do to look at your communication and your executive leadership skills, whether or not you have zero management day to day or 100%, it doesn't really matter. We need to look at how then you're using those skills to really get what you need, that long-term, dedicated, enthusiastic, engaged team member that then serves your clients and customers, which of course it's a win-win. So there's a lot that we're going to do to continue to move in these fantastic, positive directions. But we're never going to be able to do anything other than just accept the premise of this topic. Yeah, they do think that because you are, relatively speaking. Let it go. Let's keep talking about something else. And I think that this will be a great way for you then to sit in your own mind. I get it. I understand. I really do. As I said, I've spent since I was in my early 20s with different ventures, right? Self-employment. I totally understand. We don't necessarily see ourselves as, a life of ease and just unending wealth but that's not the point. The point is that relative to what our team members have at their disposal, we are exercising more, even if it's debt, which again we're going to talk about, and we're going to get on a plan so we can get you to a positive cash flow. But you need to accept this, and you need to change how you see yourself, okay? And then that way we're gonna get rid of this as a negative thing. It's a positive thing. It's a good thing. Look, if they thought this was a total disaster and there was no hope they were going to get paid, they wouldn't even be there. They'd have walked off the job, or logged off the website and done nothing. So let's look at this as a positive, because it is, and then just stop arguing about it. That is a perception. And now, like I said, let's work together and collaborate and move forward on maximizing your actual numbers of your business and balancing that with the joy you want, and let's make that happen. So thank you for being here and being part of the program today. As always, I do encourage you to come by, stay, drop by, CourtneyAnderson.com. I am on Twitter at ZealousBusiness, and I am so pleased that you joined me today for the program.